President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, in federal court in Wilmington, Delaware, just moments ago. Hunter Biden's plea deal falling apart. That's the breaking headline at this hour, amid concerns from the judge, the federal judge in this case, Mary Ellen Noriega. Hunter Biden had been expected to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges that had been agreed to in June. In addition, entering into a pretrial diversion program which would have allowed Hunter Biden to avoid prosecution on a separate felony gun charge. Those 2 things were expected to happen in federal court today, though neither of them has now happened. And in fact, before adjourning, Hunter Biden instead pleading not guilty, holding on to his not guilty position to these 2 misdemeanor tax charges until both sides can recess, if you will, for a couple of weeks. The government suggesting they come back in 14 days, though that hasn't been solidified at this point, to look at the plea agreement again. So again, the plea deal that had been worked out, agreed to by both federal prosecutors in this case and by Hunter Biden's attorneys, falls apart in federal court in Wilmington, Delaware, just moments ago amid concerns from the judge in this case, Mary Ellen Noriega. I want to bring in Terry Moran, who has covered the courts for years for us, and Olivia Rubin, who was inside the courtroom. Terry, first to you, the big headline here, obviously unexpected, but primarily the fact that this broke down was based solely on the fact that the judge in this case had real concerns about the structure of this plea deal.
Exactly, David, and it's a stunning development. It really is. After a 5-year investigation and months of behind-the-scenes negotiations between prosecutors and Hunter Biden's lawyer, they came up with a deal that the judge really pretty quickly found ambiguities in, found that the parties didn't even agree on the terms exactly, and she was not satisfied with allowing Hunter Biden pleading guilty, accepting a plea deal that might expose him to future criminal investigation or otherwise. It's amazing that they didn't dot all their I's and cross all their T's before they walked into this courthouse. They clearly wrote a plea agreement that they thought would satisfy both sides with a little bit of ambiguity in there, and the judge put her finger on that ambiguity and the thing fell apart.
Before I go to Olivia on color from inside the courtroom, one other note, Terry, just to cut through the noise on all this today. This first appeared to begin to fall apart when the judge began asking questions about whether or not Hunter Biden believed that this would give him immunity going forward to other charges that could be coming. She asked the Justice Department if there was an investigation still underway. The answer in court was yes. When Hunter Biden's attorneys heard that, they then said, well, wait a minute, no deal, in so many words. So the judge bringing up this notion that do you believe, Hunter Biden, that there will be immunity going forward on any other potential charges that could be coming your way? The fact that there was confusion on that, she said, well, wait a minute here. We should look at this very closely.
That's it exactly, David. And this has been a problem since they announced the deal to begin with. You may remember that Hunter Biden's attorney came out and said, as far as we are concerned, this deal ends the investigation. And the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, David Weiss, issued a statement saying the investigation's ongoing. That conflict was in the middle of this deal from the beginning, and the judge merely put her finger on it in questioning Hunter Biden himself. One of her jobs in presiding over a plea agreement is to make sure the defendant knows exactly what he or she is pleading to, so that it can't be appealed later, so that there's no confusion. And that's when she started tugging at it, and it came apart.
And so, Olivia, take us into the courtroom for that moment when it appeared to really begin to unravel, when she looked to Hunter Biden and his attorneys and said, do you understand this, that there could be an ongoing investigation here, and that what you have agreed to here today does not necessarily make you immune to perhaps other charges? Again, these are all hypotheticals, but the judge's responsibility is to present this to everybody in the courtroom. That was the moment when you first saw a real challenge to this?
It was the first moment, David, as you just laid out, but it certainly was not the last. And I think if there was one thing to sort of take away how this unfolded inside of that courtroom was the amount of times that the Department of Justice and Hunter Biden's team attempted to come together on this to convince the judge that they had put together a good deal, that they were both on the same side. Should anything go wrong down the road, that they would be on the same side of this. And that was never enough for the judge. And there were multiple times where she pushed back on them. She went through every single page of that deal with a fine-tooth comb, asking both sides questions. They broke for recess at multiple points so they could try to kind of come together on that. It was almost as if it was an in-the-moment live negotiation underway inside of that courtroom as they tried to fit this together into something that all sides could agree to. In that moment that you noted, when the prosecutor essentially stood up and said there is no deal here, that came when they could not agree on exactly what he was being covered by. But even when they came back after recess, they had been able to come together and say they would protect him on certain issues for certain years. Still, David, the judge continued piecing through that agreement and finding more issues, at one point questioning at all if the agreement was even constitutional and if her involvement in it would bring up issues down the road. So really a roller coaster of an hours-long hearing where they kept trying to come together, ultimately, as you said, deferring on the agreement, so no ruling on if she will accept it. And in the meantime, Hunter having to plead not guilty, David.
In the meantime, Olivia, a quick follow-up to you, because I think you're hitting on a point that's extremely important here, that when there is a significant concern on the part of the judge, it's fairly rare from the stories we've covered in the past that both sides would be able to come to an agreement very quickly or within hours before the day's end. And it appeared that after that short recess, Hunter Biden's attorneys and federal prosecutors, of course, David Weiss, the U.S. attorney in this case, prosecuting the case. He was a Trump-appointed attorney. President Biden, the Justice Department, did not change that. They allowed him to continue prosecuting. That, as you pointed out, Olivia, the two sides, Biden's attorneys and the federal prosecutors in this case, seemed determined for quite some time to still make this deal in some shape or form happen here.
They were absolutely determined, David, and you could see that every single time that they would come back from those recesses, they would say, "We have spoken, we are on the same page." At one point, Hunter's own attorney looking at the judge and just saying, quite frankly, how eager they were to put this behind them. It had been 5 years. They had come to the point. They had spent hours and hours meeting and going over the the president's son's taxes line by line and saying, these are the charges that we think have amounted from hours and years of meetings. But still, as we kind of discussed earlier, the judge really taking issue with sort of the legal nuances of how this deal was structured. And I do just want to take one point here to lay out one of her chief concerns, which is what happens if Hunter Biden violates this deal that he's signing? What do you do then? According to the deal that they had put together, they would have to come back to the judge and present the evidence for her to find a determination if he had violated, if more charges should be brought. And she said, that's not a position that I'm supposed to be in, and that gives me concerns if this is constitutional at all. And again, David, you had the Department of Justice and Hunter's team coming together saying, no, 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 this is why we can do this, but still not enough for her today.
Really fascinating. Olivia, one more question to you, because in addition to that concern that if he violated the agreement, it would have to come back to her, earlier in the day, her other main sticking point, it seemed from your reporting, Olivia, and correct me if I'm wrong, her main sticking point was not this decision on Hunter Biden's part to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges. She had more of a question about this pretrial diversion program, which would have allowed him to avoid prosecution on that separate felony gun charge, because she thought it was, from your reporting, essentially too sweeping in nature by what it also included in the writing?
That's exactly right. She laid out that she felt that that agreement underlining what he would not be prosecuted for was too broad. She was asking the Department of Justice, quite frankly, in a line of questioning that got quite heated at one point, if they had any precedent for this, if they had anything that they could show her in what world, a diversion agreement on a certain crime would include language about other potential crimes. And that eventually developed, David, into a conversation where she asked the Department of Justice point blank, is this an ongoing investigation, with the Department of Justice telling her that it was, in fact. And like you said, like we discussed before, that was a sticking point where they had to take another recess. So still clearly here, the potential for more charges, as the Department of Justice laid out, and the judge really digging into that to say, I don't want this deal to prevent anything that could come in the future.
Yeah, that got our attention as reporters, certainly got the attention of Hunter Biden as an attorneys and his attorneys at that table when they said there is ongoing investigation of Hunter Biden. Terry, Olivia, stand by with us. I want to bring in our legal team. Dan Abrams, let's start with you. What do you make of what transpired here today?
So I think you have to separate this out into two major issues, right, that came up. Both were problems. First was, what is the scope of the immunity? Meaning, when you enter into a plea agreement, the prosecutors are agreeing not to prosecute you anymore for these particular crimes. But the question became, well, which crimes and what time period? It seems they were able to resolve that issue, right? They were able to narrow it down to 2014 to 2019. They were able to focus on the particular charges at issue here, which would mean that he could be prosecuted potentially for something else. That was issue one. Issue two was, as Olivia is talking about, the relationship between the guilty plea to the tax crimes and the non-prosecution agreement on the gun charge. And here's why that's important. Because when it comes to the tax crimes, you're talking about crimes, pleading guilty to crimes. And the judge, in a pretty straightforward way, can either accept that plea or not. It's the non-prosecution agreement that makes it more complicated. Because on that separate gun charge, what the prosecutors are trying to do is say, he's not pleading guilty to anything. We're just agreeing not to prosecute him as long as he adheres to certain requirements. Well, this is where it got tricky, because the judge is saying, well, wait a second, who's going to be deciding if he violates the terms of that agreement? I would guess that has to come back to me, right? So this non-prosecution agreement isn't just an agreement that you're making with Hunter Biden. I actually have to be a part of it. It kind of seems like you're linking in the tax crimes in conjunction with this non-prosecution agreement. And as a result, the judge, in effect, saying, this is a bit of a mess. This is too much of a mess for me to accept it right now. So expect that the next step in this is going to be that the two parties, remember, the defense and the prosecution are effectively on the same side here. They want to resolve this. They want to move forward with this plea deal. And so I would expect that this is something that they could resolve. I would expect that they will come back to court with different language, particularly on the non-prosecution agreement, because it seems that that remains the legal sticking point.